Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I am back with part 2 of my 10 cards 1 kit using the Simon Says Stamp August 2018 card kit. If you haven't seen the first 5 cards, you can check those out on the video that I posted yesterday. But here we're going to be starting with card number 6. So there you can see I used my Spellbinders large label dies to cut out this label from MFT's primitive white cardstock. And I'm stamping out the sentiment thank you, as well as that little flourish that came in the set underneath it, using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And then I decided to create a pattern on my card base using the background stamp that came in the kit. So I've got a MFT Gumdrop Green card base here, and I've just added some Versamark ink all over that rubber stamp. And I'm going to take my card base and place that on top of the stamp, and then I will press really, really well. I wanted this to sort of have a shabby chic design, so the ink did not have to be perfect. That's why I did not use my Misty, but I did want to get a nice showing of the pattern on there. So I'm just pressing really hard, and then I'm using, since I had ink all over the place on the stamp, I'm just using a sticky note to go around the edges and make sure that I'm getting everything all the way out there. And then again, I'll rub all over the inside of that to make sure I'm getting a good impression. So at this point, you could take some clear embossing powder if you wanted to add a little bit of texture. I just wanted to have sort of a textured background. So I took my heat gun and dried just the ink, so it's sort of like a watermark on the background. And then here I'm grabbing some black ribbon, and I'm gonna add some 1/2 inch Scor-Tape behind that. I trimmed off just enough to wrap around the front of my card base. And if you take your bone folder and press that into the ribbon, it will make it much easier to peel off. So here I'm gonna start at the top, and I'll place that down and wrap it around the top of my card base. I then had off camera stamped out that tin vase with the peony inside it, and I colored that with my Prismacolor colored pencil. Here I've got that large label die that I stamped, and I've added foam tape to the back of that. I'm going to peel that away, and then I'll place that on the center of my card base. And then since I was going to overlap that tag a bit with the flower pot, I'm just sort of strategically positioning a little bit of foam tape to make sure that I can keep those nice and even. So I'll go ahead and place that down. And I added just a little bit of the art glitter glue behind the part that was overlapping. I decided I wanted to stamp directly on my card base here, so I'm again using my Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and I'm just using the phrase "for everything." And then it was looking a little plain, so I decided to add a shadow stamp of that same flower pot using my Versamark ink. And that will complete card number 6. For card number 7, I lost a little bit of my footage, but I did some no-line coloring, and I just stamped out that mason jar using my Simon Says Stamp Barely Beige ink, and then colored that in using my Prismacolor colored pencils. And I am working on a Nina Desert Storm panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. So I had some leftover twine after I used it on one of the cards in the first video, and I'm just using the remainder of that to tie a bow. I peeled back the backing of my foam tape so I could get that nice and secure, tie that into a bow, and then place that down here with a glue dot. I'm going to trim off my ends here, and then once I'm happy, I will go ahead and peel back the rest of the backing on that foam tape, and I'm going to pop that on top of the other pink card base that I made from the cardstock that came in the kit. For the inside, I wanted to bring in a little more of that blue that I used to tint the mason jar on the front. So I'm using Lawn Fawn Minty Fresh ink, and I stamped out the sentiment with love, as well as these flowers along the bottom here. I'll go ahead then, add some ATG to the back of that and place it on the inside of my card base. I finally, on the front of this, added some glossy accents to give that mason jar a little bit of shine. And that will complete card number 7. For card number 8, I'm going to create an outdoor scene. And I'm using some MFT Gumdrop Green cardstock. From that, I'm cutting out the Lawn Fawn Grassy border die. I'm going to cut 2 layers of that, one really thin to go in front of my fence, and one longer one that's going to peek up behind my fence. And then off camera, I did stamp out the fence 3 times. I took my craft knife and cut all around that so you could see through, and it really looked like a detailed fence. And I also cut out, or stamped out and fussy cut out, the clay pot with the flowers in it. So I colored that fence using one of my Copic markers. And here I'm attaching these 3 segments together using some 1/8" Scor-Tape. I'm going to add some art glitter glue behind this taller piece of grass. I'm going to place that down on an MFT Blue Breeze card base. Just making sure that lines up really well. And then I'm also going to take my fence and I will place that down, just leaving a little bit of that grass peeking up behind it. And then since I'm working on a couple of layers and this is such a small piece, I added my 1/8" Scor-Tape behind the smaller strip of grass, and I'm going to place that along the bottom edge of the fence. And this helped me out a bit because the fence border didn't really have lines along the bottom of it, so I was trying to be really careful and cut that out nice and even, but this way it was covered and I didn't have to worry about everything being perfect. At this point, I decided I wanted to add some sidewalk on my scene. So I'm adding directly onto the card base here some 1/2" and 1/8" Scor-Tape. I want to make sure that this is going to stick down really nice and tight again since it's such a small strip. And I've got an extra just scrap piece of, this is MFT Cement Gray cardstock. I'll go ahead then and peel back my Scor-Tape, and then I'm just going to take this scrap and I'll place that down. And I'm lining that right up with the edge of that smaller grass section there. And then I went ahead and just trimmed off the excess. So I'm lining up the sentiment "Grown with Love." And I'm going to stamp that out using my intense black ink. And then I took that flower pot and popped everything up with some foam tape. And I'll place that down to finish off the front of my card. For the inside, I've got my usual Neenah panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I wanted to find a red that would match that poppy color. So I went through my stash and found some Stampin' Up! Calypso Coral, and I'm just adding this here now. And then I attached that panel to the inside of my card base, and this completes card number 8. So for card number 9, and technically card number 10, I decided I wanted to do a little bit of watercoloring. Since I was going to set up to do one card, I figured I might as well do 2 at the same time. And I have left this full process and I've sped it up quite a bit, but if you're not interested in watching the process, you can skip to around the 13-minute mark, and that will take you to where I'm finishing up the card. But for those of you who do like to watch the process, I am using my Gansai Tambi watercolors, and I've got some Fabriano hot press 140 pound paper. So basically what I'm doing is laying down the watercolors in the approximate place of where I plan to stamp this image and just letting them do their own thing. I tend to be pretty controlling with my watercolor, and I'm trying to learn some new techniques. I'm not sure what this is called, but I have seen some other card makers do it, and I've wanted to give it a try. So there you'll see it's hard to sort of let go of that control. I did see my red and green going brown, so I took a little bit of that out, and I'm heat setting to see where I'm at just to speed things along. And I'll add in a few more drops of red or blue where necessary. And then once I'm happy with the blend of colors that I've got, I will add a few splashes of blue, green, yellow, and then finally I do add some black as well on that panel. And then for this next panel, I'm just going to go ahead and do the same kind of process. I'm adding in gray to make my tin container, a couple of different colors of green for the leaves, and then some pink and red to fill in where the flowers will be. And I am not using any wet paper here. This is wet to dry technique, so I'm just letting the color get on there and puddle wherever it plans to go, but not giving it too much help other than placing it down in the general area where I think the color should be. Again, I'm using my heat gun just to speed things along, and then adding in some extra color wherever I think it's necessary. And then finally I'll finish up with just some black splatters on this one. So now that my panels are nice and dry, I'm gonna take my stamps and I'll add those on top of my watercolor. I'm using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and I'll ink that up a couple times so I can get a nice dark crisp line. Then, since I had my Misty out, I did go ahead and stamp out some sentiments on some black cardstock. I did several of the lines, but only ended up using the ones that say "For Your Love" and "Thank You." And I did stamp those with Versamark ink, and then of course I heat embossed them with my Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail White. For the inside panel, I'm again using a Neenah panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I've stamped out the sentiment "For Your Kindness, for Everything." I've taken my watercolor panel and popped that up using some Scotch foam tape. This one with the mason jar is on MFT's Green Room cardstock. And then I've trimmed down my sentiments, and on the front I've put "For Your Love." Just added some ATG to the back of that. You'll see when I put this down, I've got a little bit of white peeking out on the edge, so I just took one of my black markers and just colored that edge, and you'll never know. And then here for the inside, I'm going to trim down that thank you strip, and I will place that underneath the other two stamped phrases. So the card's going to read, for your love, for your kindness, for everything, thank you. And I love that Simon Says stamp includes a lot of these smaller sentiments. It really allows you to make each card your own. You can personalize it so perfectly. So I've attached that down here, and then I'm going to take that panel again using my ATG gun, and I'll place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 9. Here is a quick look at how I finished off card number 10. I kept it pretty much the same, just added a banner edge on that sentiment on the front, and then left the thank you stripe all the way across on the inside. And this panel was added on a MFT Green-Eyed Monster card base. So for our final card, I've got a card base made from some white Neenah cardstock, and I used my Sizzix circle die. This measures 2.5 inches to create an opening on the front of the card base. And then I used the 2.5 inch circle and 3 inch circle to create a ring out of some MFT steel gray cardstock. Here I've taken that card panel and placed that in my MISTI, and I've lined up this wreath around the opening of that circle. I'm going to stamp that out using Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I want to color this with my Copic markers. And then I'm going to stamp that a second time on some scrap Neenah cardstock because I want to color in and fussy cut out that poppy again. So I've gone ahead and colored those. And here I'm going to take some Scor-Tape. This is 1/8 of an inch wide, and I'm going to place that all the way around this ring. I'll go ahead then and peel off the backing, and then I'm going to place that over top of my stamped image there around that opening. And it's not exactly matching the stamp, but it's really close. So there you'll see I fussy cut out that flower. I'm just laying that down on top for placement, and I want to stamp the for you sentiment inside that circle. So it's actually going to be on the inside of the card base, but you're going to see it even when the front of the card is closed. And I'll stamp that using my Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And then since I had my MISTI out, I decided to go ahead and stamp my inside sentiments as well. So I've got some MFT Tangy Orange cardstock. This is just a little scrap I had left over. And I stamped out the sentiments with thanks for everything. I've trimmed those out. They're roughly about 1/2 inch wide. And I'm adding some Scor-Tape behind them. Then I'm going to position these, and I just want to make sure that I won't see those. None of that's going to be peeking through the circle when the card is closed. So once I'm happy with that positioning, I'll peel back the Scor-Tape and go ahead and place those down on the inside of the card base. I went ahead then and trimmed off the excess, and here I'm placing down some Scor-Tape. I'm just going to add this over the portions that I know my cutout is going to cover, and that makes it a little bit easier. That way I don't have to worry about anything peeking through behind the cutout. I place that down and then I'll run my bone folder over that just to make sure that it's down nice and tight. And that will complete our final card. Here is a quick look back at the cards from today. You'll find additional photos as well as a full list of supplies at my blog post, linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.